Our final speaker before lunch is Olivier Melnick. It was actually Olivier that sort of put the bug in my ear to have a conference like this. So if you like it, I get the credit. If you don't like it, he gets the blame. It's a great arrangement. But all kidding aside, he's become a good and close personal friend, and I don't know of anybody out there with his background that's exposing the subject of anti-Semitism like he is. Do you all know that anti-Semitism is growing in our world? He's going to come and explain that to us and what can be done about it. So let's welcome Olivier Melnick.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Oh, and we've got, has anybody paid attention to the clock? No? Okay. So I should, okay, good. Well, it's a pleasure being here. It's a pleasure being here, and I'll try to make it as quick as possible so we can go to lunch. I'm going to do, I got three parts, really. I want to give you an overview of anti-Semitism, but not just an overview of history. Tomorrow morning is probably going to be the most important part, where I will try to equip all of us to do something about what's happening. But today, first session and second session, I want to really establish a foundation and give you some history. A lot of it you might not be aware of, and as believers you need to be aware of. So that's what we're going to be doing. So he's already introduced me. My name is Olivier Melnick. I am with a ministry called Chosen People Ministries. Been with this mission agency for 25 years now. And we used to, my wife and I used to, for the longest time, reside in Washington State. But last September, we defected and we moved to Texas. So we now live in the Dallas area, and we absolutely love it. And it's not as warm and humid as it is here. But we love it. And so I brought some materials. You can also find me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and I have a YouTube channel with a lot of materials. And some of you already know that YouTube channel because I do a daily devotional that I post every morning, a 1-minute devotional, and I also post weekly videos. So find me on YouTube, Olivier Melnick Today Through Jewish Eyes, and you'll get a lot of information. So let me pray and we'll get started. Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity again to continue with this conference and continue to look at your word and look at the importance of Israel and the Jewish people in your plan, your divine decree for mankind. So Lord, thank you for what you so well orchestrated in eternity past, and help us understand it today as we prepare for the final chapters looking ahead. So thank you for the hope that we have, and may you be blessed, may you be glorified in everything that we do in this conference, in Yeshua's name. Amen. You know, I was thinking about this morning, listening to Jeff and Pastor Andy, and I really, it's not complicated, but you know, I thought about this. Bible prophecy really has a twofold purpose. And I just thought about it, so I got to remember how to say it. It reminds believers of the glorious future that's coming, and it warns unbeliever of the dreadful future that's awaiting us. So it's a reminder for the believer of the glorious future, and a warning for the unbeliever of what's awaiting. And that should be a call for us to do something about it and be more vocal. So my topic is anti-Semitism. And I want to give you a little bit of the history of anti-Semitism, because one thing you probably already know is that it did not happen in a vacuum. It's not like all of a sudden people woke up 10 or 20 years ago and said, we're going to hate the Jews. It didn't happen that way. I'm just going to give you the punchline at the beginning so you'll know where I'm going with this. Satan created anti-Semitism. Okay? And well, I'll give you some scriptures to prove it. We'll look at all that for the next 3 sessions. But because he created anti-Semitism, he is able to make the irrational look and sound rational. So you're going to see this develop. And the first thing I want to do is I want to look at the history of anti-Semitism from basically the canon of Scripture all the way to today. So hopefully this first session will go all the way to the Holocaust. And this afternoon we'll go from post-Holocaust to the global jihad. And then tomorrow we'll look at some possible solutions to make it work for us. So anti-Semitism, do you see it? Because I see it here, but I don't. Oh, there you go. There is a delay. Okay. Technology. So 4 reasons to study anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism focuses on the destruction of the Jewish people, of the people of the book, the Jewish people. Anti-Semitism is strongly connected to replacement theology. People ask me all the time, is replacement theology leading to anti-Semitism, or is anti-Semitism leading to replacement theology? The answer is simple. It's yes. It's both ways. 3, anti-Semitism is an inseparable part of the fabric of Jewish history. It must be studied if we want to understand the Jewish people. Jewish history can be told through the lens of anti-Semitism. Our story has been punctuated and continues to be punctuated by acts of anti-Semitism, one after the other. Some bad ones, some worse one, and we haven't seen the worst yet. And finally, 4, it surprises people, but anti-Semitism can be used in outreach to Jewish people. It can be used, as if you defend your position as a believer, lover of Israel, lover of the Jewish people, student of the Bible, follower of Messiah. If you defend all that in the presence of a Jewish friend, you can tell them, listen, everything that anti-Semitism is about, I am not about. I am the opposite of that. And there's ways of reaching out to your Jewish friends and Jewish family using anti-Semitism or coming from the other side of it, of course. So a definition. I keep changing my definition, not because it's incorrect, but because I for the last 22 years that I've been doing this on anti-Semitism, I keep fine-tuning it. So anti-Semitism is those are probably the 2 most important words of the definition. Anti-Semitism is the satanic and irrational hatred of the Jewish people characterized by destructive thoughts, words, or actions against them. Anti-Semitism is the satanic and irrational hatred of the Jewish people characterized by destructive thoughts, words, or actions against them. I failed to mention that all my presentations come in a PDF format, and if you sign up on my table, give me your name and email, I will send you the PDF. You do not have to take notes. Because if you try to take notes on what's coming, I'm going to lose you in about 3 slides. So don't take notes, just get the whole PDF, it's all yours. Okay? A couple of quotes here. Jan Kershaw is a famous historian who actually wrote one of the best biography of Hitler. Jan Kershaw wrote, "The road to Auschwitz was built by hate, but paved with indifference." Think about that. This other guy said this, "The road to another Holocaust is being rebuilt by hate, but paved with political correctness and apathy." And that's where we are, my friends. If we don't get involved in speaking up, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Anti-Semitism builds an unlikely bridge and creates unexpected bonds between us, the believers, the body of Messiah, and the rest of the Jewish community. So let's look at a little bit of biblical foundation, and we'll go through the history. A genuine follower of Yeshua cannot hate the Jews. Psalm 83, verses 3 through 5. Look at this. "They make shrewd plans against your people and conspire together against your treasured ones. They have said," it's almost like it's like a news headline, "Come and let us wipe them out as a nation, that the name of Israel be remembered no more. For they have conspired together with one mind." And here's the most important part of the verse. "Against you they make a covenant. Those who hate Israel hate God." If you hate the Jewish people, you hate the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You hate the God of Israel. You cannot be a follower of Jesus, the Messiah, a Christian, and hate the Jews. Mind you, a lot do that out of ignorance or something else. But really, biblically speaking, you cannot. You cannot. Romans 11:11, you have a job, you have a mandate here, and if those who are watching us online, you have a mandate. I say then, they did not stumble so as to fall, did they? Being the Jewish people, as Paul is telling us. May it never be, but by their transgression, salvation has come to the Goyim, to the Gentiles, to make them angry, which they've done a great job at. Oh, wait, no, jealous. Okay, change your approach. No, I'm not talking to you guys. But in general, the vast majority of the Gentile world has made the Jewish people angry and has created a lot of harm and destruction. So the Bible tells us as Christians, Gentile Christians in the body of Messiah, your mandate is to make my people jealous. Jealous of what you have, your relationship with the Jewish Messiah. As Pastor Andy just said in the previous session, the Jewish Messiah, the Jewish scriptures, the Jewish writers mentioned that Luke was the only one that maybe people were thinking maybe he was not Jewish, but I would have to disagree with you. He was at least Jewish by profession. He was a doctor. Okay. So, that's as far as I'm going to go with that. So, here is something that that's very important that you have to understand. It's called I call it the Christian baggage, unfortunately. Here is a suitcase that has on it Crusades, pogroms, Luther, Holocaust, Black Plague, Inquisition. I could turn it on the other side and put more things, more stickers of different things. You must know what you bring to the table. When you come to a room to speak to a Jewish person, when you engage in conversation with a Jewish person, you bring a couple of those suitcases with you. You put them down, and they're part of the Christian heritage. Don't ignore them. Don't try to get rid of them. Don't erase them from history. Don't try to cancel them. Try to be relevant. I use words that people can understand. Don't try to cancel them. They exist. They happened. Understand what happened. Denounce, expose, but understand it. Because your Jewish friend, family member, workmate, classmate, they know. And they're going to quiz you at some point on some of those things. So you better know. So that's what I want to go through. I divide anti-Semitism really in three eras. Classical anti-Semitism, which is the beginning in biblical days was theological anti-Judaism, and it became racial anti-Semitism from the biblical account to the Holocaust. Then modern anti-Semitism, which I divide into new anti-Semitism and end times anti-Semitism. I haven't seen anybody else do that. They all talk about new anti-Semitism, but I see end times anti-Semitism. That's going to be part 2 this afternoon, which I believe is different. It's within the new anti-Semitism, but it started out about maybe 10 years ago, and I'll explain why I believe that's the case. For it's from post-Holocaust to today and ongoing. And by now you're really happy you're not taking notes. So, theological anti-Judaism paved the way for racial anti-Semitism. The problem is that the exegetical deviation of some of the early church fathers was a catalyst to that. Some of the early church fathers wanted to learn the Hebrew language. They wanted to study the Bible, so they studied with some rabbis at the time and developed some study methods that led them to study Scripture more allegorically than literally. And so this allegorical approach was developed. Not all of them, but most of the church fathers fell into that. And so what happened is anti-Semitism progressively grew, widening the chasm between the church and the Jews and starting the us and them syndrome. The Jews, the Christians. It started as theological anti-Judaism, theological being like it's just, it's just theological. It's not. There's no action, no nothing. We just think that we're different. But then it developed really badly and really poorly, and it was because things were taken out of context. So I want to give you one example. So some of the church fathers here that I don't know that I'm going to talk about all of them, and a lot of them are in my book on end times anti-Semitism with their quotes. And I'm just I'm quoting what they say. Ignatius, Bishop of Antioch, Origen, Chrysostom, Augustine, Jerome. I want to talk a little bit Wait, let me read you this quote from Chrysostom, 4th century AD. The synagogue is worse than a brothel. It is the den of scoundrels and a repair of wild beasts, the temple of demons devoted to idolatrous cults, the refuge of brigands and debauchees, and a cavern of devils. It is a criminal assembly of Jews, a place of meeting for the assassins of Christ, a house worse than a drinking shop, a den of thieves, a house of ill fame, a dwelling of iniquity, the refuge of devils, a gulf and abyss of perdition. I would say the same thing about their souls as for me. I hate the synagogue. I hate the Jews for the same reason. Men who are lustful, rapacious, greedy, perfidious, bandits, inveterate murderers, destroyers, men possessed by the devil. They have surpassed the ferocity of wild beasts, for they murder their offspring and immolate them to the devil. You know, I really wish you would tell us how you felt. This is in the writings. I mean, but don't take it away. Don't erase it. Read it. I'm not asking you to memorize it, but know that it exists. Because when you tell your Jewish friend, "Will you come to church with me?" Why would they want to go to a Christian church? To be treated like this. They don't know they won't be treated like this. But that's in the psyche, the Jewish psyche. This is what we're raised with. We don't know that they're actually good Christians. We know only about the other side of the coin, the bad Christians. And so this is pretty bad. So I want to talk about Jerome for a second, because I want to show you how bad it can get when you deviate from the truth just a tiny bit. Okay? A deviation of 1 degree seems insignificant, yet one degree between New York and Los Angeles will result in about a 50 miles deviation on the course. So you go to Los Angeles and you end up not in Los Angeles, which might not be a bad thing right now, but that's okay. Let's not get too political. So the church's exegetical deviation took many far away from biblical truth, leading to diatribes and eventually the death of millions. How did we get there? Well, look at this. In his monumental 4th century work known as the Vulgate, which is basically a Latin translation of the Bible, Jerome mistakenly translated the word Quran from the Hebrew keren, that mean ray of light, and he translated that into horn. Okay? So, here we have a picture of Moses with the ray of lights as he receives the Torah, which would be the proper interpretation. But then Jerome thought it meant horns, so Michelangelo's Moses, commissioned in 1505, which is basically 1,000 years after, by the Pope, ended up with horns on Moses' forehead. You might have seen that sculpture from I think it's in Florence, Italy. Never paid attention that Moses has horns. I was asked once how I kept. This is probably one of the most pressing questions you guys have right now. How does he keep this on? So don't keep it for the Q&A tonight, okay? Velcro. Don't waste our time on those questions tonight, all right? But look at this. The horns on Moses' head. And just because of that word was mistranslated, Exodus 34:29 came about when Moses was coming down from Mount Sinai, and the 2 tablets of the testimony were in Moses' hand, and as he was coming down from the mountain, that Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone because of his speaking with him. And again, in 34, and 35, the skin of Moses' face shone, so Moses would replace the veil over his face until he went in to speak with him. So that's the shining of his face, and it was translated into horns by Jerome, never corrected. So you get things like this. The deviation creates an increasingly more negative image. Look at this. You get the original one, another statue of Moses with horns. Then you get this. Go a little further here. We get an evil-looking Jewish person with horns in a Star of David. Message is clear. Or something like this. Like a middle-age illustration of Moses receiving from the hand of God with definitely some scary horns. And then you go fast forward to today, you get cartoons in the Middle East. And this is dated because this is Ariel Sharon, and he's passed away a few years now, but he's got horns. And you go all the way to the depiction of a Jewish person with a pitchfork walking over dead bodies with a Star of David over their body. I mean, this is clearly the evil Jew. So that's what we got from one word: light and horn. And that's where we get. And nobody's correcting it because it fits the narrative that people want to believe. So let's keep going. What's in a name? Well, Origen called us murderers. Saint Hippolytus called us Christ killers. Chrysostom called us possessed by the devil and degenerate. Hilary of Poitiers, cursed by God. Gregory of Nyssa, demons. Luther called us rejected and condemned. Hitler called us vermin, subhuman. So what do you do with vermin? You basically eradicate vermin. And today, we'll talk about that this afternoon, but today we are called occupiers, colonizers, apartheid people, bloodsuckers, human rights violators, murderers of Palestinians, new Nazis of the Middle East. Those are all the terms that are being used against the Jewish people today. What's in a name? What's in the Bible? What does the Bible call us? It's a little different. Zechariah calls us the apple of God's eye. Zephaniah, the daughter of Zion. 1 Kings, God's chosen people. Deuteronomy, both a treasured possession and a holy people. God's hidden ones in Psalm. A great nation in Genesis. Beloved in Romans. And there's more, but we only have so much time. This is what the Bible calls us. So you have what the world and some mistaken church leaders and other people in history call us, and you have what the Bible calls us. Which one should we go to? The Bible. This is the truth. So this is what we're called. And why? Because we're perfect. No. Actually, God says that He did not choose us because we were the better people, because we're very small people. We're not perfect. There's a really good book I would like to recommend if you want to read all about the sins of Israel, the Bible. It's all in, every page, every other page. And yet, like Pastor Andy mentioned this morning, there's an irrevocable covenant that God made with the Jewish people through Abraham, the Abrahamic covenant. So this is beautiful. And this is not because we're better. I might be the only exception. Middle Ages, we need to move because you guys are not listening fast enough. The Middle Ages, about 1,000 years, 500 to 1,500, give or take a few years. I mean, this is to round it off this way, it looks nicer on the slide. The Theodosian Code and the Justinian Code were two codes, two body of works that actually some of the from what I understand, some of the legal it has had legal repercussions to today, especially in Europe. Some of the legal jargon that's being used in Europe to this day is based on some of the work of the Codex Theodosius and the Codex Justinus, whatever they called it in Latin. That's those two codes. They included a lot of laws and regulations to protect the Christians and separate them from the Jews. And so there's a lot of different things in those codes. And what happened is that back in those days, the masses were uneducated. They would either go to a church, listen to a bishop or a priest or something, or not go or not care. But when they went, they only listened to what was being taught from the pulpit, and they would take it at face value. And what they heard was what they believed because they had no way of checking. They really didn't know how to read or anything like that. And what happened is that everything in those two bodies of work, those codes, in the 5th and 6th century, starting to establish this and widen this chasm between the Christians and the Jews. And then the people were starting to think, hey, you know what? If the Jews are so bad, we have to distance ourselves even further, and we even have to protect our people from the Jews. So that's how this thing got started. Let's protect ourselves from the Jews. And so we live in a community, they live in another one. We don't mingle with them. And so things got progressively worse, starting from the misinterpretation of Scripture, the establishing of those laws in the Theodosian and Justinian codes, and then you have the start and the widening of the Jewish-Christian polarization up to where we have it today, unfortunately. You start seeing forced baptism and forced conversions. Anything when it's forced, it usually doesn't work. Okay? But you start seeing a lot of that. Then you get to, we're moving fast because we have to. The Crusades, I got more details in the books and on my YouTube channel. The Crusades is the Christians against the Muslim. We all know that, right? This is what I learned in France when I was a kid in school. The Crusades was the Christians going to the Holy Land to push the infidels away from the Holy Land. Well, on the way, they found people to practice on. The Jews. The 1096, the Crusades, there were like, I think, 8 Crusades. The 1096, it started at 1095, ended in 1099 in Jerusalem. It was the first crusade. The Crusaders marched throughout Europe, raping Jewish women, looting Jewish villages, and killing Jewish men, claiming God wills it. Sounds a little bit like a jihad to me, but 1099, led by Godefroy de Bouillon. I can say it right because I'm French. His name is Godefroy de Bouillon, okay? They entered Jerusalem and set the synagogue ablaze with at least 1,000 Jewish people inside. And as they marched, the Crusaders with the cross of Christ on the shield and on their garment, singing, "Christ, we adore thee. Thee are our light, our direction, our love." As they march around the great synagogue at Jerusalem, set it ablaze and kill everybody inside. And you're wondering why my people don't want to go to church. You're wondering why my people are so gospel resistant because of things like this. Now, you do not support this, but they don't know that. Because to a Jewish person, a Christian is a Christian is a Christian. And as far as they know, this is what you adhere to, this is what you agree with, because this is what Christianity is all about. But we're not done. Money lending. I'm not asking for a show of hand. I'm asking for an invisible show of hand because I don't want to see it. But how many of you have heard Jews like money? Exactly. So, how did it start? The greedy Jew. Are we very greedy? Well, this is how it started. Christians were not allowed to borrow money from other Christians. They were only allowed to borrow money from Jews, who were at the time becoming increasingly limited in what they could do. We could not own property. We could not belong to a guild. I'm talking about the 12, 1300s. We could not, there's a lot of jobs that Jews could not hold. So when the Christians could not borrow money from other Christians, they started borrowing from the Jewish people. They said, hey, we'll borrow money from you. And Jewish community said, okay, that's fine. So they would say, okay, here is $10. It was not dollars back then, but it was $10. Come back next month, give me $11. Make a little money on making interest, which is nothing wrong with that. And that was not abused. It was just a system that was set in place. And when the lords and the kings of Europe saw that the Jewish community is making money on us, they decided to tax us. So $10 on loan, get back $11. Then the king said, we need you to pay $1.50 in taxes. Wait a minute. I just made $1. You want me to pay $1.50, and now I'm losing money. Well, my interest rate now is $2. Oh, good. Now we want you to pay $3. In this, over a period of time, got developed and gave birth to the myth of the greedy Jew. Jews like money. They're greedy. They love to get money. They love to get things. Guess what? There are greedy Jews. But they're not greedy because they're Jewish. They're greedy because they're fallen creatures, which means there's also some greedy Gentiles in there. Because if greed comes from our fallen nature, then you're not immune. It's Jews and Gentiles alike, right? But this is how it came about. The greedy Jew. So that you add that to the pile, and let's add the ritual murder libel. The first case was in 1141 in England, where the dead body of a boy was found on Good Friday, and with the testimony of one monk, the whole Jewish community was a lot of it was decimated. Basically, it was this: Jewish people use blood to make matzah for Passover, the unleavened bread that we use for Passover, and so. This was the accusation. We use blood to make matzah to eat for Passover. If these people had read their Bible, they would have realized that the first thing that Jewish people do when they make sure that the meat is kosher is to drain the meat from all the blood. Actually, in the Bible, it says that we should refrain from eating blood, all throughout the Old and New Testament. So we get rid of the blood. The Orthodox Jews, religious Jews, get rid of the blood. They don't touch the blood. Yet, people don't want to be confused with the facts. And that plays a lot into what we see today against the Jews. So it reemerged in Poland in the 18th century, 19th century in France, 1928 in New York, Nazi propaganda during World War II, Birmingham, Alabama in 1962, and anti-Semites are still propagating it around the world, and especially in the Middle East, that the Jews are killing Christian children to drain them of their blood to make matzah. That's the blood ritual, the ritual blood libel murder. It's still going on. The badge of shame, you thought we were done. 1215, after the Fourth Lateran Council, the Jews had to start wearing a badge known as la rouelle, which is like a yellow circle, as you see on the image of this illustration. And by the way, you see this in illustrations and paintings in museums. Nobody tells you what it is. You see the pointed hat on people in medieval paintings. Those are the Judenhats, the Jewish hats, to recognize the Jews. You see round yellow circles on garments, and people will not tell you, oh, this is to recognize that the people were Jewish. But this thing was sewn on the garment, and it was the granddaddy of the yellow star that my mother and my grandmother and my family had to wear during the Second World War, during Nazi Germany. That yellow Jewish star. That's the original one. What's amazing to me is that during the Middle Ages, people were told that Jews had dark curly hair, olive dark skin, a big crooked nose, and a stench. If that's all true, why do we need to have a thing to recognize us from a distance? You should be able to, oh, this is a Jew right there. Oof. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Host desecration. During the Fourth Lateran Council, Pope Innocent III, you got to love the name, Pope Innocent III made the doctrine of transubstantiation an official part of the Catholic Church. Jews became accused of desecrating communion wafers, and here's an illustration here. This is, from the Middle Ages. Piercing the wafers, the blood of Yeshua would pour again as they reenacted the crucifixion, for which they had originally been found guilty. So this is a result. About 100,000 Jews from 140 different European communities were massacred because we were accused of host desecration, piercing the communion wafers to see the blood because it becomes the body of Jesus. It doesn't. Okay, news flash. It's symbolic. The matzah represents his body. The blood represents his blood. In the upper room, in the Passover. This was a Passover Seder, So it's symbolic, but this is an accusation, and we still hear it. It still continues. Some people still believe it. The Jesus Christ killers. The Bible claims that Yeshua gave his own life so that he could take it back. Listen to this passage in John 10, 17, 18. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life so that I may take it again. No one has taken it away from me, but I lay it down on my own initiative. I have authority to lay it down. I have authority to take it up again. This commandment I received from my Father. This is what Jesus said. You know who's guilty of the death of Yeshua? I'm looking at them, and they're looking at me. All of us. And yet, this was planned from eternity past. He had to die. If he didn't die, he would be disqualified for being the Messiah. That's the incredible gift that we receive from God, that he gave us his only son who died for our sins. But that was not the end of the story, right? He rose again. And he's up with the Father right now, and he's coming back. And like I've been saying a lot lately, normal is not coming back, but Jesus is. Amen? The poisoning of the wells of Europe. Well, we might as well add that because, we're responsible for everything. It's not just the banks in Hollywood. We got a lot of practice, So we control that too. The Black Death, the Black Plague, was the most devastating pandemic in the history of mankind. By the way, until about 2 years ago when I taught this is the only context I use the word pandemic in. And now it's like, that looks familiar. Very interesting. So from 1347 to 1350, it was responsible for the death of tens of millions of people worldwide. Fewer Jewish people died, so of course, we're behind it. We just want to kill everybody but us. So what's happening here? Well, you see here, it's a picture by the Western Wall of Orthodox Jews washing their hands before they go to prayer. Jewish people actually wash their hands before meals every day, all the time. If you go to Israel, you go to a restaurant, you'll see a little sink. In all the restaurants, in the homes, and in that sink has a cup with two handles, and then, this Jewish person will get the water and pour water on one hand, pour water on the other hand, and wash your hands. This is a liturgical prayer that Jewish people say. And in reality, back in the Middle Ages, communal isolation, Jewish people lived in self-imposed ghettos, for religious purposes of being together near the synagogue and in their own village. The kosher laws that led Jewish people to refrain from some food that God said you should not eat this. And I'm not saying we should keep kosher, we should not. This is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that back then, the kosher laws and the communal isolation and the hand washing were responsible for fewer Jewish casualties. Really, a lot of people died, not that many Jewish people died. So that must be we must be responsible. But this is the real reason behind it. What caused the Black Plague were rats that came from, on the Silk Route, and then they just came to Europe and brought fleas, and then and then it got bad from there. The Spanish Inquisition, the first ghetto in Italy in 1615, which was in Venice, Italy. Actually, the word ghetto in Italy, I believe, means foundry. It was in a foundry district of Venice that they put the Jews together to force the Jews together. It was the first time that it was not a self-imposed community ghetto like Jewish people would do on their own, but it was a ghetto that, okay, you live there and that's where you are and you stay there. And then became a lot worse, of course, during Nazi Germany, where the ghetto, there was a ghetto on steroids. And of course, Luther and the Reformation. I don't have time to spend time on Luther, and I'm not saying Luther is all bad, but I'm just saying that Luther, at the end of his life, 2 years before he died, wrote a book of the Jews and their lies. That book should not be taken out of the complete works of Luther. If you go to a library, you should have that book. I think what people should do really is have a little explanation. So this book was written by Luther. He is the author, and maybe an explanation that this is not the majority of his views, some kind of an explanation, but the book should be there. It should not be taken out. And it's a very, very abrasive book on what Luther thought of the Jews when, at the beginning of his career, after he nailed the 95 Thesis on the Wittenberg door, and at the beginning of his departure from the Catholic Church, he had a very high view of the Jewish people. And it changed, for whatever reason. He was anti-Semitic. He got old. He got Alzheimer. He was mistaken. I don't care. Really, I don't care. All I know is that he wrote it. It's there. And my people know he wrote it. And whatever reasons is behind his writing the book, this is what he said. And because of what he said, some people took his writings and said, you know what? I think he's onto something here. And I can take this a little further. And that's exactly what Hitler did. He actually quoted Luther in Mein Kampf. He thought that he was really finishing what Luther started. So we got to be careful here. And again, great contribution from Martin Luther. I'm not saying he's all bad, but that is also there. The Pale of Settlement, we're almost done. We might get lunch. The Pale of Settlement, 1791 to 1917, it was a geographical area where Jewish people could live within the Russian Empire. It was a large ghetto, about 1 million square miles. My great-grandmother, Rachel Shimkovitz, said that 3 times. Rachel Shimkovitz came from the Pale of Settlement. She came from that area, the little shtetl, which means a hamlet, a little village, somewhere in Russia, Lithuania, depending on what day you look. The borders moved a lot. And she came with her husband, and they settled in France, where my grandmother was born, and my parents were born, and when I was born. So 4 generations ago, we're from Russia, Lithuania, we're not sure. But the Pale of Settlement, the story of the Pale of Settlement is Fiddler on the Roof. That's the Pale of Settlement. That's the little shtetl, a little village. Then you have the pogroms, also Fiddler on the Roof. The pogroms of the 1800s, government-sponsored riots against the Jewish people. The first one recorded was in Odessa, Russia in 1821. They started after the establishment of the Pale, and often as a result of the Jews' refusal to convert to Eastern Christian Orthodoxy. Let me set the record straight. We Jews do not convert. I came to a church one day, and somebody says, "Oh, I'm so glad to meet you. You're a converted Jew." I said, "Oh, no, I'm not." I said, "Oh, you don't believe in Jesus?" I said, "Oh, I do. But I didn't convert to anything. You want to call me complete a Jew, that's okay, but which part is complete, which one is... I just like to call myself a Jewish believer in Jesus, or a Jewish follower of Yeshua, Jesus. That I'm comfortable with that. But trying to convert us has never worked. So you have the Eastern European pogroms, and finally, this culminates into the Holocaust. I'll have a chance to talk a little bit about the story of my family in this afternoon's session, but the Holocaust was basically a systematic, willful attempt at exterminating all of European Jewry. And it was very unique, and I will explain that this afternoon, how unique of a genocide the Holocaust really was. You can divide it into 4 parts. Legislation, 1933 to 38, the Nuremberg laws, where laws were established and enacted to really continue to separate the Jews and to define who's Jewish and who's not. If you had like one grandparent or great-grandparent who was Jewish, that's enough to be Jewish by Hitler's standards. Then 38 through 39, criminalization of Jewishness. In 1938, November 9 through 10th of 1938 is Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, where in Berlin many synagogues were burned to the ground, Jewish businesses were broken, the windows were painted with Jew on them, and it was a big one-night event. Really, it lasted one night, but historians agree that Kristallnacht was not the catalyst, but the starting point of the Holocaust, the final solution to the Jewish question, as the euphemism says. So Kristallnacht on November 1938 was the official beginning of the Holocaust as we remember it today. Then you had isolation from 39 to 41, the ghettos, and then annihilation from 41 to 45, the death camps, with one of them, Auschwitz, had millions. There was 1.5 million Jewish children killed in the Holocaust out of the 6 million. And one person close to my heart was my grandfather, Maurice Weinsweig, who was taken from our house in Paris by the Gestapo and died in Auschwitz. So to me, it's very personal. The Holocaust was the culmination of 2,000 years of anti-Semitism. 2,000 years that we just did 2,000 years of travel through time, and you see all the things that my people have been accused of, and a lot of it is so irrational. You're going I'm watching your face. You're going really? I mean, the poisoning of the wells and the piercing of the wafers and killing Christian babies for blood. I mean, who would believe that? You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. If people didn't believe it, we wouldn't be where we are today, when we're still being accused of some of those things by some people, globally. And that's what we'll see this afternoon, is that what was localized up to the Holocaust became globalized, as we see modern anti-Semitism and anti-Semitism. So, out of the ashes of the Holocaust, a new Jewish motto was born. And that motto is never again. You ask Jewish people, they'll tell you never again. I just fear that instead of never again, we are seeing over again. It's happening over again. And so I just wanted to give you an overview of historical anti-Semitism. And then when we come back, we will look at basically where history picked up. And we'll see that maybe a couple of decades of respite where things were a little better, and then people thought that anti-Semitism was dead and it was not going to come back, because after the Holocaust, seriously, how much worse can it get? And so we'll look at that this afternoon, and we'll see that really anti-Semitism was never really dead. It was just swept under the carpet, and it was taboo to talk about anti-Semitism for a while. But then it resurfaced, and all of a sudden the victims are becoming the perpetrators, and the perpetrators are becoming the victims. And that's what we see in the new anti-Semitism. But that's for after lunch. And Pastor Andy, I'm done a minute early. I don't know what to do with myself. Do you have something you can say for a minute?
I can, This is my home church. They don't even put up a clock for me. They put up a calendar in the back. Well, that was an awesome session. Can we give them another round of applause? And at this time, we're breaking for lunch. If you go to the Sugarland Bible Church website, the part of it where we have the conference mentioned, scroll to the very bottom, and there should be something at the bottom that says "Hungry?" ? Anybody in that condition? You just push on that button, and it shows you all the local restaurants. You won't starve to death in Sugarland, I can guarantee you. And so we're going to reconvene. We're going to start worship and praise at 1:25 p.m. That gives us over an hour for lunch. So God bless you. Have a great lunch. And we get to hear all three speakers again after lunch. Praise the Lord.